Welcome back. So right now we need to start moving through the play, and we're not going to be looking at the details because the plot is building very rapidly, and we need to get to the final two acts of the play. And the speed is not only the speed of my lesson as I move through it, but the plot itself demands speed in a sense of urgency. If we go to just the end of Act 3, after the friar and the nurse have like be a man to the Romeo, and the end of this act we have something that speeds up the plot quite a bit in scene 4, and it jumps to Capulet and Paris, and Capulet tells Paris, I want you to marry Juliet. In fact, I want you to marry her on Thursday, and he says Wednesday is too soon. So Paris says, I wish Wednesday were tomorrow, and it's going to happen so fast. So the speeding of the plot, the end of Act 3, after they Capulet and Lady Capulet are going to tell Juliet that she has to marry Paris. And this is a very interesting scene because of the change that comes over Capulet and Lady Capulet. So first, Lady Capulet in Act 3, Scene 5 tells Juliet, you have to marry Paris. And Juliet says, I'd rather die than do that. And then Lady Capulet says to Juliet, well, tell your father that. It's kind of an old thing. Wait till your father gets home. So Capulet comes home and Juliet says, I don't want to marry Paris. And look at this response from Capulet. It's so strong. Here's some of the lines that he says. I tell thee what, get thee to church on Thursday, or never after look me in the face. I never want to see you again. And then he says, my fingers itch means I want to hate you. Wow, a big change. And then he says, that God had lent us but this only child, but now I see this one is too much. Basically, I wish you were not even born so strong. And the nurse says, you are to blame, my lord, to rate her so. You're speaking too strongly to her. You are too hot, says Lady Capulet. She is so angry. He's so angry here. And that's a contradiction. Like in Act 3, Scene 5, he was saying that you be mine, like you be mine, you're my daughter, Juliet. I'll give you to my friend, and you be not hang, beg, starve, die in the streets. That is very strong language for a father to a daughter. And also when he says that, it's a contradiction. In Act 1, Scene 2, he tells Paris, you have to love her, win her heart. He's changed over now, completely. It's quite odd. And Juliet and Romeo have changed too. We see in an inversion of the old and the young. Here, the older Capulet, he is hot. He makes haste. You'll see him make haste over and over again in the last few acts of the play. But look at Romeo and Juliet, how they speak. They get together at night for their final farewell. That's the beginning of Scene 5. And they're speaking about a lark and a nightingale. It's a very cute argument about is it day or is it night. And in Scene 5, at the very beginning, Juliet says, it's the nightingale. And Romeo, it's the lark. And that's back and forth. And then Juliet, it is the lark. And then she ends up agreeing with Romeo. And then look at what they say on line 51, Scene 5. Oh, thinkst thou we shall meet again? So you will expect these two young characters be crying, oh, we will never see each other again. But it's not like that. Look what Romeo says to her. I doubt it not. Very mature to say that. And all these woes, all the things we feel now for sweet discourses in our time to come. So do you see how mature that is? Earlier, he shuts himself in the artificial night, he runs away, He doesn't communicate with his friends, doesn't communicate with his father, but now he says, you know, all these problems we're going through later in life, we're gonna laugh about them. That's maturity. But look at Capulet and Lady Capulet. I want to hate you, I hate you, I want you to die in the street, hurry, get married. So the exact opposite, there has been a switch in the characters. So now we know that they're going to be married, and at the end, Juliet says, yeah, so she lies to her parents because she will not get married to Paris, and this lie is the break of Juliet from her parents. She is going to do what she wants no matter what her parents say. And let's pause here and think about how this idea of Romeo and Juliet applies still today. In psychology, we have psychological effect, and we call it the Romeo and Juliet effect. The Romeo and Juliet effect is basically the idea of parent-children relationships. When a parent tells you, you can't do that, the child wants to do that more and more. When the parent says, you know, you should really do this, the child doesn't want to do this. You might have noticed in your own lives, I'm not sure, but especially when it comes to love, Romeo and Juliet effect says that if your parents don't like your boyfriend or girlfriend, it makes you like them even more. And we can see how this comes from this play. That's exactly what's happening. Okay, when we go into Act 4, what Juliet has done, she lied to her parents. She says, I'm going to see Friar Lawrence to confess and to pray. But actually she is lying. She is going to see Friar Lawrence so she can arrange to be with Romeo. This too marks Juliet's move away from her parents. It reminds me of a child who would say to their parents, oh, I'm going to the library to study, but really they go with their friends to the shopping mall or going to watch a movie. This is what Juliet does. When she goes to see Friar Lawrence, she bumps into Paris there, and they have very interesting dialogue. Let's try to take a look at this before we end this lesson. This is Act 4, Scene 1. We have Juliet who enters, and Paris is there, and he says, happily met, my lady and my wife. And then she says, that may be, sir, when I may be a wife. You might wonder, but she's a wife, she's married to Romeo, but she's not. They haven't consummated their marriage physically yet, only spiritually, not truly married. And when he talks to her, Paris says to her, do not deny to him that you love me. And Juliet says, I will confess to you that I love him. Now, Paris thinks that she is talking about that she loves Friar Lawrence, but actually Juliet is saying, I love him, Romeo. That's a really sad scene for Paris because Paris loves Juliet, and he just doesn't know that she's married to someone else. And then Juliet says something that's pretty wise, and it brings us to something that we can look next time. What must be shall be. And Friar Lawrence says, that's a certain text. That's a certain text means what you said is wise and true. What must be shall be. In other words, cause and effect. Kind of like fate, but more like determinism. What happens in the past determines what happens today, and we have no control over it. And Juliet and Romeo are learning this lesson the hard way. Let's stop there for now.